Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. This is all about, if you're new to Capture One, how to get started in the quickest and easiest way possible. This, as well as going out on our traditional webinar platform, is also going out, fingers crossed, with the power of technology, direct to Facebook as well. So if you're watching on Facebook, welcome. And we also have a team there as well who are looking after all your questions on that platform too. So before we get to Capture One, just a couple of housekeeping things. As usual, we have a maximum amount of time allocated today, 60 minutes. We might clean it up a little bit faster than that, but we will go on for no longer than 1 hour, but it's probably going to be closer to 45 minutes. We are recording this, so you'll be able to watch it again at a later date. So we keep it up on Facebook, and we'll also send out email tomorrow, so you know where to find it on our Learning Hub as well. Now, for those of you on our webinar platform, you're very welcome and encouraged to chat and, of course, ask questions. Most of you have discovered the chat, I can see. Of course, that's public, so I'm sure you'll all be very nice to each other. If you want to ask a question in particular, it's better if you do that in the Q&A tab, because then it doesn't get lost in amongst all the chat messages. And also I have my colleague Andre here as well in the background, so you'll see him pop up from time to time, who's also going to answer questions as well. So if you see Andre, he's part of the Capture One team as well. Now, if asking questions and chatting are not interesting for you at all, then you can hide that window and it will just give you a bit more real estate to see Capture One as well. So let us begin. All right, so let's get Capture One and myself back up on screen and we can get started. So what we're going to do today is just sort of the first baby steps in using Capture One. So we'll look at how to make a catalogue, import and organize a few of your pictures. And then we'll look at the interface of Capture One so you know where to find everything. Learn about how the tools work and their similarities between the various different tools as well. And some basic workflow things like copy and apply. So you know how to get adjustments from one photo to another, and then of course finishing the workflow is how to export into your final formats like TIFF, JPEG and so on and so forth. And if there's time, we do a few edits as well, so you can see just the power and simplicity of Capture One to get to the result you need straight away. So that's our plan for today. As I said, don't hesitate to dive in with questions, and there is rather a lot of you today, so we'll try and get to as many questions as we can as possible. If we don't get to your particular one, I do apologize in advance. All right, let's get rid of my face so we've got some more space on screen, and let's go back to what I started, which was to make a new catalog and then to get some photos into Capture One, and then we can talk about the interface. Kind of hard to talk about the interface when there's nothing to look at. Right, so I'm going to close this catalog down like so, and then we're going to say File, New Catalog, and make ourselves a brand new Capture One catalog. So I'm going to call this Webinar PM. Now this is just the name of our catalog. You can of course create as many of these as you wish, and by default it sits in your pictures folder, as you can see shown on the location there. Now, if you want to place your catalog document somewhere else, and right now we're not interested in where our pictures are going to be, this is just the catalog document, which really just tracks where your pictures are and holds all the settings and metadata and all those kinds of things about them as well. If you want to change the location, you can hit on this square button here to change it. But let's just go with the default and I'll say OK. So now we've got a brand new empty catalog, as you can see, and of course the first thing we need to do is get some photos into it. Now there's a very large obvious button in the center, import images, which I hope you can spot. Now that always shows when you create a catalog for the first time. Now for subsequent imports, you'll be able to see import up here in the top left, and then you'll be able to import there. Okay, so let's hit the enormous import button in the middle, and then let's go through the import dialog. I'm just going to reset these tools So it looks exactly like it would for you when you first start to use Capture One. So this is what you're going to be presented with. So right now we need to obviously give an idea of, to Capture One, where we're going to pull images from. Now this could be from a memory card, if you just pulled it out of your camera, for example, or it could be from an existing location already on your hard drive, or it could be from an external hard drive source as well. So really anywhere that your system can see photos, or from a memory card, then that's where we're going to import from. So I'm going to pull in a selection of photos from an existing location. So I'm going to say choose folder, and then we're going to go for, let's grab Zoe's folder here because it has 3 subfolders. So that allows us to see another sort of option of Capture One as well. So right now it still says no images in folder, but if I tap on include subfolders, straight away we can see the contents of all those 3 folders. So 67 photos, which we're going to import straight into Capture One. Now also we need to tell Capture One what to do with these photos, and by default current location is selected. So that means that those photos are going to stay exactly where they are. Capture One will just know how to access them. Now, if we're importing from a memory card, we obviously don't want to leave them on the memory card, so we're going to want to specify a location of where to copy those to. But I'm happy with them staying on my external hard drive, so that's that. Now, whilst you're learning Capture One, there's obviously lots of other options here in the import window, like for renaming, making a backup, adding adjustments and presets and styles and all that kind of stuff. But that's something you can think about later on. For now, let's just get some photos in. So I'm going to say import all, and then they will start populating into Capture One. Now it's relatively quick. So the only thing we're doing now is generating previews. So this essentially means when I look at a photo in Capture One, we're looking at a high resolution preview. We don't have to always access the raw data. And the reason for that is just essentially performance. So when I'm skipping between photos, it's nice and fast, and we don't have to recall the raw data. Now, one important setting that some of you might need to change is if you go into your preferences on Capture One, if you're on a PC, it's on the edit menu, and have a look at, let's just close our activity window, the preview image size. So this is the size of that high quality preview that we make. Now, if you're on like a 5K iMac or a 4K display, then you will need to make that larger because you want your preview to fit your display. If it's too small, then what Capture One has to do is always look at the raw file to display it on screen. So if you are using a high resolution display, before you do anything in Capture One, bump that preview image up to a higher one. Okay, so now we've got some photos into Capture One. Let's have a look at the interface. Now we can see everything. Let's have a look. All right, so the way Capture One is divided up is essentially into modular areas. Now there isn't different modules like you might know from Lightroom, like develop and process, develop and library and mapping and so on. Everything is accessible in one place. Now the interface is really sort of comprised of these 4 different sections. So over here on the left hand side we have tools, which sit in various tool tabs. That's these little icons at the top. Obviously in the center is the viewer, where we can see the current photo that is selected from the browser on the right hand side. And then up the top we have our toolbar, which has various sort of action buttons like turning on grids and guides and so on and so forth. And then that way, grids and guides and so forth, which just turn something on and off, like exposure warnings, grids, as I just said, and a few other buttons as well. Now in the center here are the cursor tools, which change the behavior of what the cursor does. So for example, that could be choosing the crop tool and then giving us the ability to crop our photo, which we'll come to later. Now, we don't have time to go into sort of extensive options about customization and so on, but suffice to say, if this is not a setup or a layout that isn't working for you, then you can change all of those elements in a great number of different ways. So let's say, for example, you're used to looking at tools on the right hand side. So if we go up to the view menu, this is where you can do a bulk of your customization. So have a exploration of that, but just to give you an example, if I go to customize tools, then we can choose place tools on right, and one click, it's now switched it around. So again, have a look in that view menu of the potential of what you can do for customization. So I'm used to looking at tools on the left, so I'm going to change those back to place left, like so. And in terms of customization for the tool area, then there's sort of two important things that it is worth knowing. First of all, is that the tools are divided into the scrolling area and what we call a pinned area. So the pinned area allows you to always pin, funnily enough, the tools you want to have always available that are not in the scrolling area. Now, if you wanted to pin something else like the exposure tool, I could just drag it out, bring it above this black bar, and then drop it into the pinned area, or I can click on the three dots and say move to scrollable area, like so. So you can do that, of course, for each individual tool tab as well. And if you wish, you can right click and add and remove any tool from any tool tab. So as I said, lots of customization options. Have a little bit of self-exploration on the view menu to see exactly what you can do. Okay, so one last thing about customizing the interface. Don't forget under Window and Workspace to actually save your workspace. So if you've done some customization items, and to be honest, everybody customizes their workspace at some point, remember to save it so you can always return to it as well. All right, let's just have a quick pause and answer some relevant questions. So Alan says 20 seems to create an empty catalogue by default. Check your updates, because now if you go to download the new version, then you'll be able to download 20.001, which is an update we made today, which had a couple of bug fixes. And one of those was to stop it creating this default catalogue. Any difference between using a memory card into the computer versus attaching a camera with memory card to the computer? It depends really. If you have a fast memory card and a fast reader, you might find it imports a bit quicker. But really there is no difference. Some people don't like plugging and unplugging their camera too much. Some people prefer taking out the memory card. Doesn't really make any difference. All right, okay, let's move on and talk about how the interface works. So let's get rid of me and decide what we can do. Sorry, 1 second. I just realized that one of my lights was starting to die. So rather than seeing a muddy David, I'm just gonna fix that so that we're not sitting in the dark next time I look at you. All right, so now we need to look at how the tools work. All right, so basic operations with the tools. Let's drag out the exposure tool so we can see it a little bit clearer. What you'll notice on the top of each of the tools is these 5 or 6 small icons. Now, most of those icons sit on each of the tools and do the same thing. Very obvious what they do mostly is the first one goes to the online help. So if you hover over the question mark, then a little help bubble pops up saying online help. The next one is an auto adjustment just for exposure, like so. So if I click that, then it will auto adjust. If we just do a few quick edits to this photo using the sliders, like so. This button here, the reset button, funnily enough, resets the tool to 0. Nice and simple. So let's just put some values back in again. If you hold your Alt key down, or Option, as you might know it, and click on this, then that will do a temporary reset. So Option click does a temporary reset. And also if you click on any of the names and hold, then that will just give you an idea. Let's just bump that up. Then you can see before and after for each of your edits as well. The 3 stack lines, they allow you to find different, as you can see, presets, or indeed save a preset for any given tool. And finally, the last one that allows you to change the defaults. So if you find on your, for example, Fujifilm X100T that you feel the defaults should be slightly different for any tool, you can apply those defaults as well. So let's pop this guy back. So that's how the various different tools work. Another thing that's worth mentioning up on the toolbar is this one, the reset button. So this will reset everything to 0. And also the auto adjust icon here, and you can decide what elements you would like to be part of the auto adjustment, and then one click, and then Capture One does a pretty good job of an auto adjustment, which you can of course tweak and adjust to your own liking as well if you wish, but auto adjust up there. Now if you want to do a preview of before and after, if you hold your Alt or Option key down once more and long press, on the reset, then you can see before and after like so, just as a quick preview. Okay, so you should find that most of the tools behave in that exact same way. So let's have a look at another operation which you need to do is copy paste, which is very simple. So let's grab, I'm going to actually shift catalog. So I'm going to close this catalog down, and I'm going to say file open, and I'm going to open our demo catalog like so, and that's going to pop up open, as you can see. There we go. And I'm going to choose, let's take 4 photos that we can do an edit with. Let's grab something where now you can see, actually, while we're looking at this, you can see in this particular demo catalog, good opportunity to talk about it. In the first tool tab is our library tool tab, which is like an overview of where all our photos are. Now it's divided into 3 sections: library, user collections, and folders. And we have some shortcuts like show me every single image in the catalog, which is just over 4,500 on this particular one. It will show me the last 10 imports that were made into the catalog. And then user collections is where we can do some virtual organizations with things like albums and smart albums and so on. And in the folders area, this shows me the exact location of where my photos are. So I'm going to just scroll down and click on this folder, and let's just hide my viewer. Now again, you can hide and show any of those elements that I spoke about. So the default shortcut to hide the viewer is G, and then that will open up a grid of photos, as you can see, like so. So then that just gets rid of the viewer, so then we can easily scroll down and then see all our various different shots. So what if we wanted to sort of copy and apply settings from 4 or 5 photos which needed sort of similar treatment? So let's grab this sequence here for example. So we've got 4 photos which need the same treatment. So let's go back to my exposure tab, and let's just fix this. So it's a bit too dark, so let's open that. Let's cool down the white balance a little bit to something around there. And let's open up the shadows just so it's a bit brighter, like so, and let's have a bit more contrast and so on. So now we've done some base adjustments to the first photo, and we want to get them across to the other 4. Now let's also throw in a crop on this one. So I grab my crop cursor tool, and let's just put a crop something like that. And I'm going to shift select the other, let's just grab 4 of them. Shift select so that they tile up in the screen like so. So we can see what's happening with the copy and apply process. Now, of course, copy and apply you can do with shortcut keys. You can do use shortcut keys for pretty much everything in Capture One. If you want to be reminded of what the shortcut keys are, you can go to Edit Keyboard Shortcuts and click on a summary here, and that opens up a web page which shows you where all the shows you the default set of keyboard shortcuts, which you can of course edit yourself as well. So as I was saying, you can do copy and apply using keyboard shortcuts, but that's hard for you to follow. So I'm going to use the icons up here in the top right of the toolbar. And we're also going to make sure our adjustments clipboard is open as well. So I want to copy those adjustments from the first photo to the other three. Okay, so we're going to say copy, like so. Now, as soon as I say copy, you notice that the adjustments that were placed on those photos have been loaded into the adjustments clipboard. Now, all I have to do now is say apply, and then they will be copied across. Now, notice if we go back to our crop cursor tool, that it ignored the fact that I'd done a crop on the first photo. Why is that? Well, generally, when you're doing sort of batch processing like this, the cropping is quite sort of unique to the photo, so you don't necessarily always want the crop copied across by default. So by default in Capture One, cropping is ignored. Now, if you want to change that default behavior, it's very easy. In the adjustments clipboard, under auto select, you can just change it to adjusted instead of adjusted except composition. So that's where to find that adjustment if you always want your crop copied across. Now, there's a nifty little shortcut that you can do if you only want to copy one adjustment across. So let's go back to the first photo and let's change something. So let's make the midtones a tad brighter by using the brightness control. So let's just brighten up the midtones a bit. Now, let's say I just want to only copy the brightness adjustment I just did to those other photos. Now, in each tool, if you remember, I mentioned briefly there was a little copy and adjust icon. So if we tap that and we make sure brightness is ticked on, which it is, and I say apply, then it copies that across to everything else. Equally, we could do that with the crop. So if we go to the crop tool, crop, and we click on this and then say apply, then my crop's going to go across like so. Now, to make that even faster, let's just change the crop on this one. If we go to the crop tool and I hold down my shift key, and it says that in the help bubble there, it says hold down shift to apply immediately. So that involves us having to go into that dialog. So if I hold down shift and click once, then straight away my crop goes across. Nice and simple. So if you just do need to do a quick tweak, then we can play with the adjustment like so, shift click, boom, copied across straight away to everything else. Really nice and simple. So let's just go back to one of our other photos for now. So let's choose this collection. So right now, just to recap, you can comfortably get photos into Capture One. You know how to find them in the Library Tool tab. You know the basic behavior of the tools. You can do some simple copy and applying. Something else which everyone always does is tend to crop. And you've seen me cropping a couple of photos so far. So hopefully you can see it's extremely simple. But just to cover the potential, if we grab our crop tool, you can see the handles light up at the corners. Let's just choose a darker shot. So you can see the handles light up at the corners and in the middle. So when I crop like so, we can reframe just by dragging in the center. Couple of shortcuts which are present, of course, in many applications. If you hold down your shift key, you can lock the aspect ratio so it stays the same. And if you hold down your Alt key or Option key, then it will crop about the center. And of course, if you want to do just a quick arbitrary rotate, just move the cursor to the outside of the crop boundary, then you can click and drag and you can tweak your crop or rotation as you wish as well. Now, once you're done cropping, you don't really have to apply the crop. You can either choose another cursor tool, because as long as the crop cursor tool is chosen, you will see those crop boundaries. Or I can just tap enter, and then the crop goes away like so, and my panned cursor tool is chosen. Let's take a quick break for some relevant questions. How do you undo a crop after you've applied it? Good question. So if we're on a crop and we don't like that crop, you can of course do an undo, like Command backspace, if it's just the last thing you've done. Or when you have your crop cursor tool, if you just do a right click with your mouse, it brings up a little floating sub menu, and we can hit the reset button and the crop is undone like so. Or you can go to the crop tool itself in the lens tab and reset here, and then we can reset our rotation here as well. But I find it's just quicker if we have our crop selected to right click, and then we can pull up the reset there, and we can change our aspect ratio and all kinds of other stuff. So it's a nice fast track way to do it. Let's have a look. Just checking the questions. I think we covered most of those. Andre's picked up a few of yours as well. Can you change the crop between landscape and portrait with an aspect ratio? Well, nice thing in Capture One. Let's say we pick 2:3 and I start cropping. It's going to lock that to 2:3. If I force the crop like that, just by pushing my mouse or pen across, it then changes it to portrait. I was going to say landscape then. So you can just force the crop either way. It doesn't matter when you make an aspect ratio whether you do long and short first. It's just really simply a matter of squeezing the crop in either direction. Okay, let's move on. The last sort of part of the workflow, if you like, is just to export some photos. So how will we go about that? Well, first of all, let's say we want to export these 4 photos. I'm just going to make that one a bit darker. So we're going to, in this one, let's open up the shadows a little bit and add some contrast, like so, and get some highlights back. Why not? Let's say we want to export these 4 photos. So I'm going to shift click. So we've got these now selected in our viewer. Now there's 2 methods that we can employ for exporting. So if we say export over here on the toolbar, that's obviously the first logical place to find it. So if we say export, this opens up a very simple dialog where we can just choose our final destination and also the parameters of the export. So let's choose a folder. I'm going to just choose my pictures folder. Why not? Set that as our export folder. We can make an export subfolder if we want to. So let's just call this Japan, although they're not all Japan, but who's checking? You can change some naming convention here if you wish. By default, it'll just use the name of the file that you've selected, but you can click this button to dig into different output presets and so on and so forth. Now down to recipe is where we choose our format. So let's say I wanted to have a TIFF. Let's go for a 16-bit and let's go for full size 100% like so, and to notify me when completed. So now if I hit export, Capture One will start processing. Activity window will pop up and there we go. So if we go to our Finder and go to pictures, then you can see there's my 4 TIFF files like so, ready to go. Now that's fine, but let's say I wanted to have TIFF and JPEG. So what would I have to do? I'd have to go back into my export dialog, perhaps change my parameters. Maybe I wanted to then make Japan JPEG or whatever. Go down here, change this to JPEG. Perhaps I wanted to have a slightly different size and so on, and then I could export my photos like so. That's fine, but it's kind of an inefficient process to keep having to go in and out of that dialog. So that's, it's not ideal. It's fine for just, I want to export these photos quickly. But if we're going to do it in a more sensible way, that's when we use a great feature called process recipes. And these are found in the second to last tab. And really, this is a way of defining a preset for export. And then all you have to do is choose the ones you want and start the export process, and job completed. Far more efficient than having to go back and forth into a dialog. So let's see how that works. So right now you can see we have a few recipes which are made by default. So for example, if I select this one, this is going to create me a TIFF 8-bit file. If I go to this one, this is going to resize to a JPEG file at 2048 pixels on the long edge, and so on. So if I want to make a new process recipe, I can just hit plus. So let's say we wanted to make one for Instagram. Then I would change this to a JPEG, knock the quality down a bit, change to sRGB, and scaling wise, as it would be for Instagram, I would change this to 1080. So now I've kind of made, oops, go away Wacom. Now I've made myself very quickly a recipe for Instagram. So what if I wanted to just run a TIFF and my Instagram recipe at the same time? Well, first of all, let's choose an output destination. So I'm going to choose the pictures folder once more. And underneath, I've got a handy little thing called a token recipe name. So what that's going to do is it's going to look at the name of my recipe and make a folder for that recipe, and then divide the photos up automatically into those folders. So we're scratching 2% of the power here of process recipes. If we had an hour, we could actually talk about optimizing your export on a whole other level. So we can have recipes go into unique locations. We can obviously run multiple recipes at the same time. We can change the naming based on the recipe, all kinds of stuff. For now, we're just going to knock out an Instagram JPEG and a full-size TIFF, and we're going to divide them up into their output folders based on their recipe name. So now I've defined that, I just need to hit process. Let's go to our output destination, so I can click this arrow, and then you can see there's my TIFFs, like so, and then there's my Instagram as well. So these have been resized to 1080, and then if we go to TIFF, these are my full-size TIFFs, as you can see as well. So if you haven't investigated process recipes, if you're still in your trial or new to Capture One, this is one of the biggest, best time-saving workflows you can do, because once you set it up, remember it's a one-time setup. Once you have all your process recipes nailed, then of course it's very efficient to just pick the ones you want, and away you go. So let's have a look at a couple of questions. Just check the Facebook people, all right? Hello, Facebook people, if you're there. Thanks for hanging on and joining us there as well. I can see my colleagues are doing a smashing job at answering questions, so thank you. Looking at your questions, yes, Jacqueline, when you've made a crop, you can actually commit with an enter. So that's just like a small change we made. So let's crop Bambi here, tap enter on the keyboard. Crop is committed, as you can see. Looking at the questions. Come on, webinar engine. There we go. Sorry, it was slow to open the questions. When you're importing from Lightroom, which adjustments do not transfer? So if you want to import your Lightroom catalog, you can say import Lightroom catalog. It will actually tell you on the dialog, John, that is. So we can pull in most things, but we can't look at adjustment brushes. That's not possible to read, but all the metadata, cropping, straightening, star rating, color tags, all the stuff that would be annoying to have to redo, all comes across. Now, no two raw converters are the same. The way Lightroom, Capture One, On One, Skylum, or whatever interpret the raw file is kind of unique. So it's not like you're going to see a like-for-like shot once it comes into Capture One. But we do, the best we can to save you as much work as possible. There is a tutorial on our Learning Hub which goes through importing a Lightroom catalog if you wish. Let's see, just checking a few other questions. There we go. I think that answers the common threads. As I said, if we don't get to your very specific question, I do apologize. But there is rather a lot of you, so just doing the best we can. All right, so how are we doing for time? So we've spent just over 35 minutes. So I did estimate around 45 minutes, so we can actually do a few edits, which is kind of a bit nicer than just do this, do that kind of boring stuff. So what we do is we edit a few photos just to give you an idea of the editing workflow for Capture One as well. So let's get rid of me and let's do this one. So I'm going to reset. So that's going to take me back to the start point. And I'm going to begin my workflow in the exposure tool tab. And first of all, it looks pretty good out of camera. Let's hide the browser actually so we get a bit more space with Command B. First of all, exposure is pretty good. I might warm it up ever so slightly. Exposure wise is nice. I'm just going to brighten. I'm not going to use exposure. I'm going to just brighten the midtone slightly, up the contrast, and then because we're losing the highlights in the sky and the top of this building, let's knock down the highlight slider. And don't be afraid to be quite aggressive with this slider, because you can get pretty good results even when you push it hard. And I'll open up the shadows a little bit like so. And finally, let's add some clarity, which is like a mid-tone contrast. So I'm pretty happy with that. But what I'd like to do is sort of add a bit of creative flair, if you like, and do a bit of color grading. And this also shows us one of the tools that's unique to Capture One. Now, we could be just very happy with this edit and job done. Let's actually crop slightly. So I'm just going to crop the bottom a little bit, or I've got an aspect ratio on. So let's right click and change that to unconstrained. It's better. So I'm happy with that. And as I was saying, I want to apply color grading. We have this great tool called the color balance tool. Any of you can use this. It's just a completely visual, intuitive tool. You don't need to know anything about color mixing, matching, or any of that stuff. But what I'm going to do is use a really powerful feature, which is working with layers in Capture One. So what layers do is simply allow you to draw a mask with a brush, or a gradient or a radial mask, and then of course your adjustments will only affect certain areas of that photo. Now when it comes to color grading using the color balance tool, we kind of use a bit more of a Photoshop technique and use an adjustment layer, so like a filled layer. And the benefit of that is that I can then moderate the strength of my color grading. So with that in mind, I'm going to say new filled layer, like so. And we're going to double click to rename it. So let's call this color grade. And when I say filled layer, if I press M on my keyboard, you can see the mask covers the entire photo. So now whatever I do is going to affect the entire image. Now the color balance tool, this is super fun to use. And if you haven't used it, give it a try. So it's essentially divided into shadows, midtones, and highlights. And all I need to do is pick up the control point and drag it towards the color that I want to tint to. So we're going to do a really typical cinematic color grade, which is like a tealy shadow, and then also a warmer midtone and highlights like that. And we can also play with the contrast by dragging the luminosity sliders on the right hand side. Now the benefit of having this on a layer, let's put you back away, is that I can throw in some other edits. So I might like to desaturate this a bit, so it's a bit more vintage feel. And also if I feel, you know what, I've gone a bit too far with my color grading efforts, I can take the opacity down. So if I go to 0 for opacity, that's no color grading. And if I go up to 100, that's the maximum effect. Or I can pick some kind of good compromise in between, and I'm sort of happy with that. So let's see what the photo looked like at the start. And all we did really, remember, was some basic slider based editing, so nothing super fancy, and a quick color grade. Any of you watching are capable of doing that. So if we hold our Alt key down and click on reset, you can see how the photo came out of camera, and then with our few simple edits like so. And we can turn our layers on and off to see what the effect had of our color grading, and then of course change the opacity if we want to boost it up a bit. So that's a very simple edit. Alan says, how did you hide or reveal the browser? So remember, all of the options or shortcut key options relate to something in the menu. So you can either go to edit keyboard shortcuts right here. So now if I type in browser, you can see it shows me hide and show browser is Command B. So it's easy to locate your shortcut. So if I hit Command B now, then I can show and hide my browser, or G to hide the viewer, and so on. So dead simple. Okay, how are we doing for time? We're good. We can throw in another edit. So let's look at sort of a color edit now. So let's hide our browser with this furry guy. Again, pretty good out of camera, but he's kind of in shadow a little bit. So I might like to open the midtones by using the brightness slider. like so, and pull back some of the highlights just with the highlight control and a little bit of clarity. And if we zoom into 100%, underneath the clarity slider is one called structure. And what structure does is add in or improve edge definition, if you like. So it's great for wildlife, architectural details, landscape, and so on and so forth. So if we bump up the structure, I know you're on a webinar broadcast, so it might be harder to see, but this just helps improve like the fine edges. Now, if you want to play with a bit of color, the color editor, which is different from the color balance tool, the color balance tool is, if you like, that the ability to color grade or correct for color casts, where the color editor allows you to pick a color and change the appearance. So let's say we wanted to just brighten the eyes a little bit. I could grab my color picker, click once on the eye, and it tells me which color patch to use. Or to be even smarter, I can click and hold on the eye, and then now I can just drag my cursor left or right to change the hue. So you can see my hue slider moving, or I can go up and down to change saturation, or I can alt click and then drag my cursor to change the density like so. So if I want to brighten that a little, then I can do so, and it isolates that color rather nicely. So very simple to use that direct color editor. Now those up and down cursor actions, if you want to change those, click on the button here, and then right here you can see it tells you that hue is horizontal, saturation is vertical, and lightness is option and horizontal. But if you want to change anything, you can do so by picking those different options like so. Okay. Oh, here's a good tip. Now that I've seen this tool here, as a couple of you were asking about it, let's go back to, let's pull out a Fuji file. Sorry, a newer Fuji file. Let's go for deciding which one to pick. We've got a few Fuji files to choose from. Oh, actually, let's go for one of our new campaign ones. So let's grab one of this handsome chap here. And you can see this is a GFX 100. And on the supported Fujifilm cameras, you can see we have all the various film simulations. So if you're working with Fuji, what happens is if you've selected a film simulation on the camera itself, then if you have Capture One set to auto, Capture One will use the film simulation that was set on the camera itself. Now at any point you can override that. So if I decide, you know what, I fancy using a bit of acros, what should we go for, yellow, then I can choose my Fujifilm simulation there. Simple as that. So I know Fujifilm cameras produce great JPEGs, for example, but you may as well have the benefit of shooting RAW. You still get your Fujifilm simulations, and then of course we can do a nice trick like this shadow is a bit dark, so let's open up, whoa, not that much, open up the shadows a bit and control the highlights, and then we get the benefit of RAW editing and of course the Fujifilm sims as well. So Fujifilm sim shooters, very easy to find. That's just in the base characteristics tool. Now if you're an existing Capture One user, you might notice that under engine it now says Capture One 20. If you have any older Capture One catalogs or sessions, then it will still be on the Capture One 12 engine. And if you want to upgrade, all you have to do is hit the upgrade button. If you want to upgrade more than one at once, you can just simply select as many as you like and then hit the upgrade button, and it will do all of them at the same time. Okay, there isn't a huge amount of change in the engine for color, but there's a massive change in terms of noise reduction. So any of you that work with high ISO or long exposures, for example, would do well to upgrade and check out the new processing engine. All right, let's have a look at a couple of your questions. Let's see. Can you create a style that includes a layer? Not currently. That's Gregory asking. But can you apply copies of layers to images in different sessions? So if you have a photo in a different session, then the way I've got around it in the past is just to have, if you like, a donor image in the session, which I can then take my color grading from. This is black and white, so that doesn't make much sense. Color grading on this color one, which I can then copy and apply to everything else. Just worth pointing out is that if you want to copy and apply layers now, when you hit our little shortcut, which you learned earlier, you can decide exactly what layers you want to copy across from one photo to another. So that's really super handy as well. Okay, let's have a look. Just checking in on the chat, and also how are we doing on Facebook over there? Great. So thanks for my colleagues answering those as well. Just a question that came via Facebook. Can you do a black and white conversion onto a layer? Yes and no, really. I mean, what you could do, let's take this guy. If we made a new filled layer, for example, we could then take saturation right down, and that effectively gives us a black and white, which can then be part of a layer, or of course we can then play with the opacity. The disadvantage of that is that the black and white tool, which is down here, gives you individual density control over each of those channels. Now, the reason why black and white doesn't work on a layer is not because we're mean and nasty or anything like that. It's just the way the mathematics behind the black and white tool doesn't translate well currently to working on a layer. So you can, who was asking that on Facebook? That was David. You can do that workaround. You just use the extra flexibility of working with those different color channels in the black and white tool, for example. We're just checking we answered those questions. Can you create a workspace just for showing the images and no tools at all? So one can select using the whole screen and move to a workspace with the tools. Yes, that's a really great question, actually. So if we just wanted to have, for example, I could hide the tools, Command T. We can also hide the toolbar. So you can have a more minimalist sort of display like this if you wanted to. We can actually change the browser to auto hide. So then that just gives us even more minimalistic, which we can browse through. And then when I hover to the right, then of course our browser pops up like so. So there's lots of different ways you could do it. I could even do, if I do F for full screen, then now we've just got the image like so. And then I've got my auto hide left and right for the tools. And then as I scroll through, I get this nice kind of clean interface as well, if you like. So there's lots of different ways that we could do it. Let's just come out of full screen mode, and then of course you can change your workspace. So if I go back to the default, it's going to look like this. Lots of people as well, they tend to have like a bigger browser, which they might find more helpful for when they're selecting photos as well. There's really, I've never seen, if you like, two people work in the same way when it comes to their interface in Capture One. We always have a debate with every new release. Let's make a new default workspace, and 10 people go away and come back with 10 different results. So we're gradually sort of refining it and making it cleaner and more universal and so on, but still no two people tend to use the same set of tools at the same frequency in the same order. So it's really good to spend a bit of time, Augustine, just creating your own workspace. But yes, and of course if you filtered images, like if we just mark a few like different star ratings and we go to the filters tool, which is down here, sorry, then I filter to 3 stars, then of course I can just start working on my selects as well. That's a whole other webinar for 1 hour, if you like, on selecting, culling, rating, organization as well. Lots of different ways that we can cut that, but that's definitely a great idea. Can you create a keyboard shortcut to apply a preset? Not currently, no. You can sort of do it in OS X. So if we have some built-in styles, then the way you apply a style is just to hover over the top. Under adjustments, if we look at styles, I can't even remember where it is now. I'm so used to using the styles tool itself. But you can also access the styles in one of the menus as well. So in OS X, if you give a shortcut to a style in the system preferences, then yes, you can do it, but not within Capture One itself. Let's have a look. Last couple of questions, and then we will let you carry on with the rest of your day. Can you save a slideshow? Alan was asking. No, not currently. There is a slideshow option, as you correct. Can I copy my workspace from desktop to laptop so both look the same? Yes, it's possible. It certainly is. Probably the best thing to do is just make a quick support ticket, because I don't know whether you're on Mac or PC. So what we store is sort of some data on Capture One in 2 different locations. So a different one for Mac, different one for PC. So drop a ticket to support and they'll let you know, or hit us up on social media. But yes, you can copy your styles across your workspaces, your pretty much how you've set up Capture One. Okay, I think, ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much covers what we were going to talk about today. To continue your journey, which is of course very important, you've got 2 very important resources to look at. So the first of those is this one. I'm going to bring it up on screen. That's support.captureone.com, and you can get in touch with support with submit a request up in the top right. There's release notes, there's all kinds of things. So if I start typing something, then we've got various troubleshooting, for example, if I start typing that. So lots of different articles that you can read and learn about, release notes, and so on and so forth. So don't forget the support portal. Then we have learn.captureone.com, which essentially shows you a whole bunch of different tutorials, and then we stick the webinars at the top. So these are webinars that are coming in January 16th and January 30th. And if, for example, you want to look at tutorials, we tick the tutorial button here, and then I want to know about color editing, so I tick this button over here, and then now we see tutorials simply relating to that. So don't forget the Learning Hub as well. That's super important. When this webinar ends, of course, you'll be able to watch it again tomorrow. That was Sarah asking. You'll get an email sometime tomorrow which will show you where to find the recording. It just goes on YouTube and in the Learning Hub on the same place that you signed up. So don't forget to sign up for future stuff as well. So you've seen that those 2 new ones are up on the webinar. So sign up for those so that we can keep chatting with you in January again. So enjoy your holiday / Christmas break. So enjoy a good couple of weeks off, everybody. Thanks to those of you on Facebook as well for joining in as well. I'm glad the internet was nice to us and let us broadcast to 2 places at the same time. So many thanks again for your time today. Always a privilege, and hope to see you all again soon. So take care now. See you soon. Bye.